everyone, Darth here, and welcome to a very unusual, unscripted, totally off-the-cuff thing. As we're coming up to the Obi-Wan Disney Plus series, I realized that I have not seen pretty much anything of Rebels, so I am woefully unprepared to actually understand all of the different references and stuff that are going to be going on in the Obi-Wan show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start trying to watch at least one episode of Rebels every day, and I'm just going to record my reaction to it, do kind of like a live analysis kind of thing. And the goal is to be able to just crank out like one of these a day, do like no editing on it whatsoever, fingers crossed, and just kind of go through the episode after I've watched it. So I've already got some things in mind, that I kind of want to talk about, and just kind of look at the things that I'm looking at while I want to watch the show just for enjoyment, kind of turn off my brain, but then at the same time, I'm going back, thinking about the things I really enjoyed, thinking about the things that worked really well from, like a filmmaking standpoint and that kind of stuff. So just right off the bat, that opening intro with the triangles coming in was just beautiful. And then the camera panning down to get this other shot of the Star Destroyer, I loved it. I was just taken by the filmmaking, like right off the bat. The Mask of Vader, I think I've heard people like complain about before. It's not great, but it's not the worst thing ever either. I was thinking that, which they didn't really need to do, to introduce, I guess this guy is one of the Inquisitors here, which they didn't really introduce him right off the bat, which is one of the kind of like, actually maybe Vader says his name. I'm just going to assume he doesn't because I don't remember. But introducing a character whose name you don't know right off the bat, so you're able to identify them, kind of like we talked about in that Rogue One video when we were doing that, is pretty important. I'm going to be abhorrent with names, by the way. So when we get down here and we come up on blue-haired boy, my first thought about him, because we find out through the rest of the episode that he's basically an orphan. And they may address this later on, but it was just something that immediately hit me because when we've talked about characters and their believability in our other, podcasts and stuff, one of the things that we always kind of come back to is like, does the scene make sense? And you're like, how do they live? And the thing that it looks like he's in the middle of a wheat field, which makes it look like this thing is some kind of like farming, like this is where the farmers live or something like that. But then it's like, why is he the only one? How is he living there? It looks very derelict with its upkeep, and obviously he's the only one there. So is he just by himself? And how is he living here by himself? How is he surviving? We see him go into the city and steal to make a living, and we see that he's very, very good with his thievery because he's able to do it so subtly that the troopers don't even feel it when he goes up and he takes their comms. But it was kind of just the believability of the whole thing, of him being out there, and kind of what the point of this structure was in the first place. Like it seemed kind of odd to me that this big spear was out in the middle of a wheat field. Again, maybe this is somehow addressed later on, although I'm not sure, because I'd finished both of this the first episode's a two-parter, and at the end of it he goes off and joins the crew, so I'm assuming we don't really come back to his old derelict home, although maybe we do it at some point. But anyway, so that was just kind of seeing his introduction and everything. We see him reacting to the Star Destroyer flying in, which looked awesome, but then at the same time I was also trying to remember about how low level altitude those things can actually fly, which I'm not sure if we've really ever seen one like kind of like swing down this low before. That shot of him going across the wheat was just beautiful too. I love that. Really solid intro. I really liked everything for the most part with this episode. There were a couple like really awkward, really kind of cheesy kid style jokes that were told throughout. But for the most part, I do know it's a kid show. Even the animation is really cheesy compared to like the later stuff in Clone Wars that we saw. But it's also really neat to be able to see this kind of stuff with the Empire being so militaristic with their dealing of the average person, which is not something that historically we've really seen in many of the shows, aside from kind of Solo when he's trying to escape. We kind of see it a little bit there. But then we have this first sequence with blue hair stealing the little comm link, and he gets all the troopers away. Then he steals food from the guy that he saved because he feels that he is owed. Then he goes and helps steal these crates here, which it was kind of interesting that these things were full of like super black market guns, and they were like barely guarded whatsoever. And one of my favorite things that they did that I've seen in these first 2 episodes was the way that they in tune that the Force is in play, and it's very much done with the music. I'm not sure if it's the music or if it's the sound effect or if it's like a combination of both of those things. But when Blue Hair and Ponytail see each other, there's this like high tinkling musical sound, and we see that several times when Blue Hair is going around the ship and he's being led places by the Force, and we're getting that indication, that audio indication of the Force, which is not something that we've typically ever seen in Star Wars. We saw that a little bit with Luke when he's with Grogu, and when he's like using the Force to lift Grogu so they could walk together, you hear this low like whooshing sound to indicate that the Force is being used, which the only time that we've really ever heard anything like that was like in episode 1 when they introduced the Force push, and then you heard a big whoosh when they did the Force push. It was that same kind of like whooshing sound, which I kind of go back and forth with as to whether the idea of an audible thing with the Force being a good or bad idea, because it's kind of just supposed to be this like ever present thing, it's not necessarily supposed to be this like audible physical thing that you summon and that changes the air around you to produce noise. So then next, we're introduced to Rainbow Hair Girl, and they have this awesome little chase sequence where they go off and steal these canisters, which I totally thought were food initially from something that was said. And this whole time that Ponytail and Rainbow Hair are stealing all of these boxes, Blue Hair's sitting on top of the buildings kind of watching them and being in awe, and then at some point he realizes, oh wait, I can kind of get involved in this, I can help steal stuff. And then we meet this pretty cool guy who is like giant lemur, I guess. And so they've got Rainbow Hair Girl, Ponytail dude, giant lemur dude. And then we've got Blue Hair, who's just kind of like driving around being awesome, doing his own thing. And again, a lot of this stuff is like really cheesy with the type of action that they did, but it's also fun and entertaining. And then we get to see a little hint of the fact that she does not just like shoot him in the head. So we immediately get the idea that they're not bad guys, or they're not, they're stealing, but they're not like real bad guys, so they're not going to go off and kill a kid. That she's gonna take half the stuff and keep it, and gonna let the kid go, and also she's gonna warn him, hey, don't let the big lemur catch you, because then you're really gonna be in trouble. So then we have this pretty neat race where they're all flying around, and Ponytail's trying to catch Blue Hair, and then there's all of the stormtroopers are kind of in the mix too, and just it's a really fun little action sequence, and obviously really reminiscent of the chase in episode 6 out in the forest moon of Endor. So then Ponytail catches up to Blue Hair, and then they go back and kind of get separated when a TIE fighter flies in and takes out Ponytail's speeder. Let's see. And then, Blue Hair's going back to his base. Not really worried about the TIE fighter coming in behind him, which was interesting. Because he's been kind of like relatively smart so far, but now he's just like, oh, let's go in a straight line because there's nothing else to do, which is kind of just a lazy way of storytelling for the character to suddenly start making stupid decisions just because the filmmakers have to get him off of the bike. They have to make the speeder blow up, and they have to get him in this helpless position where the other good guys can come in, blow up the bad guys, and save him. And none of that would have been possible if he were flying his speeder really aptly like he was doing earlier and dodging everything. If he had dodged all of those TIE bullets, if he had pulled out his slingshot thing, shot down the TIE fighter somehow, if he had done all of that, showing again how competent he was, that would have been good for the story, but it would have taken away the tool that the filmmakers had of being able to bring in the rest of the crew with this ship and kind of like advancing the storyline. So that's kind of one crutch that a lot of filmmakers have, is that they will make a character weak as opposed to something he had been doing before that was strong. And they have to do that in their mind to progress the storyline. They couldn't figure out a way to have him continue to be competent while still needing the help of someone else. So then moving on, he gets help from Ponytail, and he's trying to save this crate of magical stuff. Does a really cool little jump to get up there, which impresses Ponytail. And I'm still trying to figure out if he used like the anti-grav thing on the box or if he used like a force jump there, but either way, it was pretty cool. And then we are pretty immediately like fully introduced to the rest of the crew all there together, and you get an idea right off the bat that Lemur is the really kind of like aggressive. He's not a bad guy, but he's the kind of anti-hero kind of character. And we see that Blue Hair is not. He's not timid. He's not shy. He's still a kid, but he doesn't care about eyeing down this huge gargantuan muscular thing that could crush him. It doesn't bother him to stand up to that. Next we're seeing like the competency of their pilot. We see their little R2 ripoff up here, who looks like he has a weird like plate floating around on his head, but cool little action stuff. With a little bit of more introduction, we at some point see the rainbow hair girl take off her helmet, and Blue Hair like starts totally crushing on her. Lemur dude locks up Blue Hair in like a little closet thing, and Blue Hair crawls up through the air vents and kind of like escapes for a while. And so everyone is kind of going around the ship trying to find him and figure out where he went. Then we are on to... So this was kind of a neat moment when he falls out of that air duct, kind of lands in a chair, opens his eyes, and realizes that, wait, he's in a ship that has left the atmosphere and he's up in space for the first time in his life, which is really weird to think about in Star Wars, where everyone seems to have a ship that can go into outer space, and then we're still seeing people, like I assume same thing with Rey, that she would have never actually been in outer space until they took the Falcon out that one time. Maybe that's wrong, but it kind of would have been neat if he had had a chance to like marvel at it some more, or just kind of freak out about the fact that like there's nothing on the other side of that glass, and if it goes away, then his air goes away. Maybe he like takes a big breath and tries to hold it in because he's freaking out because he's never been in space before. All kinds of possibilities that we just never seen. Okay, there's the scene. Okay, so there's a rainbow girl, and Blue Hair totally starting to crush on her. And we see some awesome fight stuff. We see Angry Lemur again. And now we are getting to the introduction of one of the big bads, which, again, I don't remember his name, so we're going to call him Helmet Head. So we got Helmet... Oh, we can't call him Helmet Head because he lost the helmet. Okay, we're calling him Mutton Chops. All right, so we got Mutton Chops, who is the much more competent... The way that he interacts with the officer here immediately gives you the implication that he is very, very experienced, much more than, the officer here is in charge of a lot of people, but he has no idea what's going on. He doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know how to address it. But Mutton Chops is obviously many steps above him, is very confident of the situation. Even though they're constantly being robbed and all this stuff, he is still very confident of what's going on. So that's a really interesting example of a good character introduction, and they are not just introducing his character in that way. They're doing the juxtaposition of him versus that officer that are just side by side. And so it's very easy to show the strength of one character by having a weakness of another character right beside them. And as long as it's not weird, because this officer is probably the only time we see him is like kind of like this shot. Although he may have been earlier in the food, in the stealing scenes, but still, the idea is that making a character weak in order to lift up another isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like we talked about earlier, when Blue Hair was made weak just so his speeder would blow up. That's way different than this guy who's like a one-off character being made to look weak so that someone else can be introduced to look stronger. They're kind of two different things, even though it's the same idea of bringing down one character to bring up another. So we see him talk about how he's going to start setting traps and whatnot. We get a little bit more dialogue with all of the different characters kind of meeting each other. Then they go down and land on this planet. We get a little bit of the backstory of how this planet was, at some point it was taken over by Tarkin. And they were talking about how he didn't give anyone an option whatsoever. It was just everyone was either you submit or you're going to go to jail kind of thing. And so everyone on this planet is like starving and don't really know why, because we don't really see any evidence of why they're so bad, so poor off. So that would have been something really beneficial to see as part of this analysis, or part of the scene building and the world building, is to show specifically why they are so bad off after Tarkin came in and did whatever he did. Like show that the ground has been raised, or the ground has been poisoned. They were building ships and there's oil everywhere. They can't grow any more food. Something like that to show like why exactly they are in such a bad state. And maybe that's in there and I completely missed it, but from what we see, it kind of just looks like they are all just sitting around and being hungry, and we're not really sure why that is. So then we get that they are meeting up with this kind of like black arms dealer, and he's the one who had given them the intel for where these guns were. And then oh yeah, it was guns and food. They stole guns and food. That's why I kept thinking it was food earlier. So they sell the guns to him. He offers to keep half of it in order to give them some information about where this whole caravan of Wookiees is, which leads into part 2. Alright, so he's telling them about the Wookiees, so then we're going in and doing the whole food thing, and this is where Blue Hair gets a little bit of, this is where he starts developing his, like, feelings of humanity. This is the first time that he's kind of, like, interacting with other people and seeing that they can be thankful for, his contribution to their lives and that kind of stuff. So this is where we start to see a little bit of a character arc developing for him, and this is where we also see the, like, kindness of Big Lemur and all of the characters, who's especially for him, he's been like gruff this whole time, and now he's like happily giving people food and smiling and stuff. So we get to see a little bit more about him as well. So going forward, now we got Blue Hair kind of not knowing exactly what to do. This is the first time that we get that kind of hint as to what is happening with the sounds I was talking about, the sound or the music or whatever. That's the force that's calling to him and telling him to, leading him up inside the ship. And this is when he goes up into Ponytail's room, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so he kind of feels that he needs to go on the other side of that door, whatever is there, and so he gets down, starts breaking into the door. Fake R2 sees him and goes to report him, and in the meantime, he gets into the room. Again, we hear that sound. The Force kind of leads him to look in this secret little drawer that's there, even though it doesn't look so secret because you can see the outlines of it. But then he finds this cool-looking box thing, which a lot of us, I'm sure, just immediately assumed. I love that lightsaber. Yeah, that a bunch of us just immediately assumed was a holocron. So then he's waving around the lightsaber like a kid who just immediately found a lightsaber and starts twirling it around, and then your parent comes in and you're like, hey, you're gonna cut off your arm, because he totally could have cut off his arm and not knowing that, hey, this is actually a deadly, deadly weapon that will cut through absolutely anything. So the inclination at this point, and I was curious trying to remember if there was any positive info in there to show whose room that was. I assumed that it was Ponytail, but I don't actually know if that was definitively shown. So at this point, it could be kind of neat to think if they had done it a little bit differently, where Tentacle Girl was the one that found him, and so she was indicated to be the Jedi, and then it turns out later that it's Ponytail and not her. But the fact that he is the character that that's like, give me the lightsaber, that is indicating that it is his. So that's just kind of like a filmmaking technique of whoever is the one that's saying get out of the room, that indicates it's my room. If you're saying give that back, you're indicating that it's yours. So whoever is the person that's demanding the action, that's kind of like the filmmaking way of saying that you have ownership of whatever it is that we're discussing. So anyway, we have a little bit of dialogue, and I think this is when they start talking about the tests and how he's starting to pass the test or something like that, and that's probably going all the way back to when Ponytail first sensed blue hair through the Force when they were both in the city there. Then they got another little bit of dialogue with Homeboy being nervous around the pretty lady, and then a little bit more talk about if helping people, how he doesn't want to go out on a limb to help people, and how like bad of an idea he thought it was, and all that kind of stuff. Then we're having another group session. They I didn't notice the I'm assuming that's the same hollow chessboard that the Falcon had, and it kind of is hilarious that I wonder if just every ship had that, and that's like the game that you're supposed to play in Star Wars, is everyone just plays hollow chess. But anyway, so they're all in there talking, trying to figure out what they're going to do, if they're going to take the kid back or if they're going to go straight on and do their thing. And that's when what does he do? I remember that he had tried to get out again. Oh, he went the other way. He went back through and then tried to listen in on them. Alright, so next we have them coming up, and they are going to go and rescue those Wookiees that we heard them talk about. And then I thought this was really, really cool, this idea right here of the TIE fighters being mounted underneath the ship. I don't know if I don't focus too much on the ships like Eckhart's channel, those kinds of people that really love all the ships. So maybe this is more common, but I just don't know that I've seen this anywhere. And I thought it was a really neat idea that the TIEs can dock and save fuel and all this stuff while still being there and still being important and everything. And something that I thought was really, really well done from a world building perspective was the second that they sensed that something was wrong. When Tentacle Girl was communicating with them, and the second they sensed something was wrong, they launched those TIEs. Like, normally the bad guys are so incompetent that you don't see stuff like that. You don't see them making very smart military moves that anyone should make. Like, if it was me, I'm cautious enough that anytime a ship comes out of hyperspace anywhere near my vessel, we're launching at least a few TIE fighters, because what if this exact situation happens and it's a trap? We want to immediately have them surrounded and know that that we have the upper hand in that situation, even if it's a completely normal thing. And if nothing else, it'll always keep our guys on top of their toes, because they know when anybody comes in, they're trained to treat it as a possible threat. So I really liked what they did with these TIEs, which is just such a small thing of thinking to launch these right off the bat, which probably the reason they did it was just from like a drama perspective of let's inject a little bit of tension in here by having the ships immediately start flying at them, which makes the whole situation a lot more dangerous. So then next we come up and we have the pretty hilarious bit about this being a hairless Wookiee, which does not go over whatsoever. Which now I'm going to have to Google hairless Wookiee and see what we find, because if he looks like a lemur dude, then it would be pretty funny. So anyway, going on, now we are coming inside the... So half of them are inside the ship. Blue hair stayed out there with Tentacle Girl, and then they see they start getting their signal jam, and then a huge Star Destroyer comes out of hyperspace right by them. So she tells Blue hair that he has to get in there and warn everyone because there's no way to communicate with them. And she's going to stay there and be ready to escape, I guess. It wasn't super clear as to what she was really accomplishing, but both of the ships get drawn up there. Would have been, I guess we never really see tractor beams, but I would love to see like a little visual indication of tractor beams. That always kind of annoyed me about the first one, that you can't see anything. But maybe that's just because sci-fi like pretty much always shows something. Okay, this has autoplay. Well, that's awesome. I did not realize that. So now we are back. We have met Mutton Chops again, and he is the one who has set up this whole sting operation. And we find out that it's actually stormtroopers hiding behind the door waiting to ambush them, and there's no Wookiees there whatsoever. Ezra gets in there and warns them, and they have this whole thing set up with Rainbow Hair Girl, where she's going to turn off the artificial gravity, which gives them an advantage somehow, which I'm still not totally sure. I mean, it gives them like a little bit of a surprise advantage, but like they can't fly either. So it would have made a lot more sense if they had rocket, some kind of rocket jetpack something, like a Guardians of the Galaxy dude, where they have something attached to their feet or something like that. So if they planned for this eventuality where they were going to be, completely weightless, then she has fake R2 that will, roll them around, and then the others know kind of how to grab the ceiling and move, but it just doesn't make sense that they planned for this method of distraction and then didn't have something set up in order for them to fully utilize it. Like she did, because she had fake R2, but the rest of them didn't. So them having some kind of jetpack thing on would have really enhanced the storyline, enhanced how much they thought and planned for these kind of things, because the fact that they didn't have that kind of indicates that they were either rushed or they were a little short-sighted in actually planning for all this stuff. So it makes them look a little less competent than if they did have something, made them look way more prepared. So with Mutton Chops jumping back and forth while all the stormtroopers are flailing in the background, that's another indication of how much more competent he is. Again, same thing of making the other people around him look incompetent. That increases his competency, while at the same time, all he is doing is just jumping around and moving in zero gravity. It's really not that impressive. At least if you look at sci-fi movies and how often we've seen this kind of thing done before. One thing that I really wanted to see differently when I'm kind of thinking back to this whole thing is the countdown sequence for when the gravity was going to turn off and when the gravity was going to turn on did not make any logical sense. The only way that it made sense is if Ponytail was using the Force to sense when it was going to happen, which I got no indication from how it played out that's what was going on. It's just like it almost looked like she looked at her watch, but I don't know that the rest of them ever did. So that was one thing that kind of like mildly bugged me, was not knowing how they coordinated that. Then that, I think that's just a mistake of of the filmmaking, of how they chose to show that. But that could just be that they didn't, the writers didn't fully think through how that coordination was taking place, and if they meant it to be him using the Force to sense it, they didn't show that the way that they did with all of these other times. But that may have been intentional, so they don't give away the the surprise fact that he's a Jedi, and they kind of hold that for later. So then we have this really neat scene where Mutton Chops grabs Blue Hair, and the lemur is like super sad about it, and he like wants to help, but he can't because he's just totally outgunned. There's no way to get to him, and so there's just a really neat looking shot of where the door closes, and then wait, was it back a little? Yeah, it's probably right here. So you actually see the anguish on his face, which is a really neat addition, because a lot of the time with like that anti-hero kind of character, you don't really see too much emotion from them. And there it is. And the fact that they actually went and took a shot of him falling down like that shows a lot of emotional anguish that you don't normally see from that type of ruffian character. And I keep thinking to Jace from My Pretty Floral Bonnet, Firefly. That's like the archetype that they were going with, right? Is that really tough gunslinging Jace type character, and like you would never see him like be this upset and like slump down and depressed because he let a kid get captured, you know. So that gives us a much bigger insight into this character and to the things that he cares about and all that kind of stuff. So then next up we got more talking. We got them escaping, and they do a cool little explosion from the other ship, which then like disrupts the tractor beam and all this other stuff, so they're able to effectively get out without any issues. And then they realize that Blue Hair is not with them, and at this point the lemur is more like worried about getting in trouble. Maybe he's ashamed of what happened, but he goes through a lot of he goes into deep defense mode and trying to prove there was nothing else he could have done, blah blah blah, the kid should never have been there in the first place, all that kind of stuff. So then next up we got Mutton Chops that comes in, briefly talks with Blue Hair, and then we have the kid gets searched and everything gets taken, but somehow they miss the like big box that's like clipped to the back of his belt. Like I still don't understand that whatsoever. That like I would have loved to have seen something like I can't remember what that magic show is, where they have the playing card and they're kind of flipping it back and forth between all of the different actors so that the people searching them don't find the playing card. But if it was something like that, where he just had it in his hand and he throws it to his other hand when they're looking over here, and then he kicks it behind his head when they're looking over there, and that kind of stuff, and then that would have been a much less stupid way of showing that he was able to keep it without them finding it, when there was no way for him to hide that behind his back without them seeing it. So then we have him kind of sit, and it's a weird cross of him meditating and him just sitting there and trying not to cry. You know, so the idea that was meditating and using the force, which caused the box to open up, didn't really sit right with me, but at the same time, it indicates that he was meditating. It just doesn't seem like that fits with this character. You know, you've got a little homeless kid who's doesn't seem like super disciplined, and he knows meditation. Like that doesn't really track. But Jedi are mystical. Maybe it's like an inherent trait that all Jedi just naturally feel the urge to meditate. I don't actually think that, but maybe that's what the filmmakers were going with when they, kind of wrote this scene. So then he sees this message from Obi-Wan pop up, which looks like it is the probably the exact message that Obi was sent when he and Yoda went into the temple, and we never actually see it in Episode 3 when he sends the message out. All we see is him closing the receptacle thing after he sent the message. So then this, I'm assuming, is the actual message that he sent out to all of the Jedi. Then next we have all of the good bad guys talking about what they're going to do, and if they're going to go and rescue the kid, and then how stupid that would be to go rescue the kid, blah, blah, blah. And then the kid pulls a neat little trick, gets the two stormtroopers to go in, locks them in the room. Then he starts wandering around like which is really kind of interesting how that scene played out, because he totally came off like the arrogant little kid that he is. Like in this whole scene where he's wandering around this lower hangar, he's like not in a rush. He's kind of just wandering around. The fact that he instantly found all of his stuff was very coincidental, that bordered on being, annoyingly coincidental, but let him have it. The idea that he was able to stumble into the one room where they had his possessions, which were not being gone through by anyone important, it just doesn't really track too well. But at the same time, this is like a huge trope that characters just instantly find their pack of belongings and then they escape. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy did it. We saw when Rey immediately found the saber and all of Chewie's stuff when she was on Kylo's ship. It's pretty frequently done, unfortunately. I thought this whole bit was really neat when he puts on the helmet and then hacks into the comms, and it was especially neat because that was a throwback to the very earlier part of the first part of this episode, where he takes the comm from the one trooper. So we see that this is a learned skill that he has, and he is just taking it and applying it to another usage because, assumedly he's never had one of these helmets before. He's never had to do it in this fashion before, but he's pulling the same trick that he had pulled in other, in other points of time in his life. And the fact that we were introduced to that very early on is just good storytelling. This point, I need to sit and watch because I still cannot figure out how they got back. Okay, so they just literally don't show it. So they fly up to the Star Destroyer and just dock and don't get noticed? Like, how did that work? And then that spray stuff that she just sprayed blows up. But why? Like, is it like little each spray dot is little tiny robots and then all of the little robots blow up? Or like, why is a spray so combustible? I mean, maybe that's the thing in real life and I just don't know about it, but it also was like super confusing when I watched that and was trying to figure out, and especially because Mutton Chops looks at it, I think he smells it, and then he realizes what it is. It's just like an orange spray. And then he's like, oh no, watch out, that's going to blow up. Why is the spray going to blow up? Okay. But it's also a symbol? The rebel symbol? Okay, so how did she spray a spray that immediately formed the rebel symbol and then the rebel symbol blew up? This one's going to bug me for a while. Okay. Let's just move on because that is uber confusing. Let's see if we can find. Okay, she sprayed it just like in one swish, and that's it. And that one swish automatically forms this. So it's like a magical super spray that forms a symbol and then the spray blows up. Okay. All right. Well, that's some super fantasy, super futuristic sci-fi kind of stuff there. It's somewhere between fantasy and sci-fi because they invented a really sci-fi thing with a spray that can blow up, but that is also really fantasy because they didn't explain it. They almost made it look like she painted a glyph and then the glyph magically blew up. So it's kind of like a combination of the two different worlds that Star Wars exists in, fantasy and sci-fi. Really cool little escape sequence. Like their escape sequences are really well done. Their fights are really well done. Another great little moment of the character arc, building for Blue Hair as he's like, no one has ever come back for me before. I've never had people that cared about me, blah, blah, blah. Then we had an interesting moment where Mutton Chops, he seems like he realizes something. Yeah, so he gives this weird, like, half smile. He realizes that they were communicating using the helmet, and that teaches him something about his enemy. And so he gives this little half smile. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out what they were going with. Like, why does him using the helmet to communicate, how does that teach him something? I still don't understand what that tells him about his enemy. Like, it wouldn't be that they are knowledgeable about stormtroopers or anything like that, because that just doesn't track at all. So anyway, that one really confused me when I first heard about it. I want to go back and look at the timing of when this came out. Like, did this come out before or after Solo? I'm really interested in looking at that, because I don't think this is at all what we see in Solo. When they land, I'm pretty sure that this whole area here was actually kind of like dirt and then like waterways and stuff, and it was not this huge like paved place. So I want to say that this was just, maybe it's supposed to be like a different landing pad or something, or maybe that's the paved waterways and it just looked like it was all okay. Yeah, so that is waterways there. It looks like it was all paved, but it's not, because you can see right here, it looks like the stormtrooper is actually standing down inside the water. At least that's what it looks like. The little Wookiee child is super adorable. The entrance of the ship here was beautifully done. This whole action sequence was just very well done. Blue Hair never really knowing if he wants to take part in it or if he wants to run and hide, and he's dealing with that whole change to his entire mantra, his entire survival instinct, has always been centered on putting himself first, and now he's trying to learn how to put other people first. Seeing the Wookiees grab him with one hand was just hilarious. I always wish that we would just see Wookiees tear people apart, but I know it's a kid's show and we're not supposed to do that. But still, I'm not gonna give up hope. The fact that they didn't have air support here kind of like bugged me. Like, they've been so prepared for everything, and then they just left the ship on the ground, and she was in it, but she wasn't really prepared for TIE fighters when they're in an imperial controlled port. So that was kind of annoying on one hand, because it seems like they really think things through a whole lot of the time, and then other times they don't. They don't think things through at all, and it seems like that's probably just, again, a filmmaking crutch, that it introduces tension into the scene in a really, really easy way, where they don't have to worry about writing anything properly. They could just have bad guys come out of nowhere, start blowing stuff up. So then we have Mutton Chops, who finds them somehow. This still confuses me. Oh, that's why he was smiling. Okay, so when he was smiling because he realized that the dude was listening over the headset, then he realized that he would have heard where the Wookiees actually were, so then he knew where to find them, because he knew they were going to go and try to rescue the real Wookiees. So that's why he was smiling, because he knew that he had to come here to Kessel, and that's where he would find them again. Now that makes sense. Okay, so then we have another really cool little fight. We got the Wookiee that gets hurt trying to go rescue his kid, and Lemur goes and helps him, and then Blue Hair is trying to figure out if he wants to go and rescue the kid or not. Tentacle Girl takes the ship away, so she's trying to lead the TIEs away, so it's just a land battle after that. And then we're left with the epic moment of when Ponytail is like, I'm a Jedi again, I've been hiding it for too long, and when he struts out and casually dodges the laser blasts, that is one of the coolest things. Okay, quit pushing buttons. There we go. I want to watch it full screen. That right there, oh, that was so beautiful. That little dodge that he does, it's so subtle, and it's not even in slow motion or anything, but that little dodge that he does back and forth, that's the same kind of thing I've talked about in past videos. I wish they would have done more with the Force to show the capability that these people have, that they're seeing on a faster level, they're reacting on a faster level. We very rarely see anything like that in the real life films. And it's something that I would have loved to have seen. It's interesting that he has his lightsaber in two different parts. I assume that that was not a construction thing, that that was a way for him to hide it from average people, because he could still carry it, but it looks like it's a flashlight and then something else. So again, this scene was awesome. I loved it. Something else I would have loved even more was for the reactions of the enemies weren't necessarily, I think, the best. It's maybe, I mean, it's definitely shock. There's some anger, righteous indignation, but there's not fear. And that's what I think they would have been seeing a whole lot more. Is any Jedi that's lasted this long is theoretically super awesome, and they might be, all of them, about to die right now. And there should have been a lot more trepidation, I think, to their reactions to him. Vice versa, this could have been very intentional, and the filmmakers were saying, there are so few Jedi left, everyone has lost their knowledge of them, everyone has lost their fear of them, everyone has lost their respect of them, so these guys don't think anything about going up against a Jedi and just assuming that they're going to be able to crush him without too much effort. So, really cool scene, and again, this whole thing is building up to the idea that they have talking again about how the good bad guys have so many plans for everything, and how they pre-plan a lot of these things so that they have this is a code 22 or something like that, and so they know that that means everyone get in a big box and the ship's going to come down and it's going to pick up the big box and we're going to fly away. So they have the idea, and we also saw that, I didn't mention it, but when they're on the speeder bikes going along the bridge right before Ponytails gets blown up, he does hand signals to Lemur, and then Lemur rides off, and that's, again, just like this, with these pre-planned signals and codes and stuff. It shows that the level of planning that they go to, but then you go back and they have scenes where they cut down the gravity, and they don't have rocket boots, so they could use that to their advantage. So we see that they have extreme planning in some instances and then no planning in other instances, and it doesn't really track. And I don't know if that's something that's like a filmmaking problem where the writers just didn't think about this and they had a really cool idea here, really cool idea here, but then they didn't like fully tie together everything. Or like I said, if that was just, if not having, I guess you can't have a character be brilliant all the time, otherwise it's a lot harder to introduce conflict, to introduce like real danger for the character. Not really sure exactly what the issue is there. Then we have a kind of cool little scene where he does a Jar Jar flip over the trooper's head and then fires off. I have no idea what he is shooting there. I guess it flips up on his wrist. I always thought he was holding it, but it's not. It's like popped up on his wrist, and he's shooting like energy blasts. It's really cool. When I never like stopped to look at it, and I thought it was just awesome when I was watching it live. But what I'm kind of laughing at more is the fact that he did this like superhero flip, and then lands after jumping up like 30 feet in the air, doesn't think anything about it, and it's just like it was an average everyday thing, which I mean, maybe it is, but we haven't seen any indication of that whatsoever. We haven't seen him do anything that is, except for when he jumped up to the ship. So if we combine those two things, maybe we could say that that first jump was not him using the anti-grav on the box to get up into the ship when they were out in the middle of the field. Maybe we could combine that with this and say that it was him using a force jump, and that's why Ponytail reacted that way, combined with this force jump. So that makes a lot more sense than the anti-grav thing, now that I think about it in that way. So he rescues the kid, then Mutton Chops finds them, which this is just like needlessly interjected tension, because I don't know why he would have immediately started chasing the kid, how he would have immediately found him so fast after the ship. Actually, no, the ship is still there. So why did he start chasing the kid instead of staying there and trying to capture the Jedi? like the entire thing doesn't really make sense. It's a little bit more of needlessly interjected tension to get Mutton Chops to accost the kid one-on-one, and then for this epic hero moment where the Jedi rises up on the ship, which is just an awesome shot. I understand why they did that, why they wanted to do that. And then where's the... So here, this is the one joke I've seen so far that I absolutely loved, and I'm so glad they do it. The stormtrooper is like, "Is this your first time fighting a Jedi?" "Yeah, it's like my 9th time. This happens all the time." And then he just gets yeeted off of the bridge. Okay. So now they're back on their ship, and everyone is happy, and all the Wookiees are thankful, and everyone is saying good job, and blah, 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 blah. And then they're thanking the kid. Wookiees go off back home. They're going back to take Blue Hair back home, and he steals the lightsaber because that's what he does, and Ponytail just lets him have it so he could, do his little epic decision-making thing later on. So he's going back home. Dude says, "Give me what you took from me," which we think is the lightsaber, and then immediately it's like, oh, he's going to get back the little box thing. We see that it's still in the altered state, and then Ponytail and Tentacle Girl talk about how he passed the test, blah, blah, blah. We see the kid back in his little spire lookout thing so he could protect the wheat, I guess. Yeah, because that's what all wheat fields need maybe that's the big scarecrow. I don't know. So then he's looking at the lightsaber, and we see him kind of looking around the room and trying to figure out... I can't figure out if he was trying to look at like where to put his trophy, because that's what Ponytail kind of insinuates, or if he's just looking around the room and looking at how empty it is and thinking he doesn't know what to do. Also, the fact that he has those 3 helmets there shows that he's probably done that same trick with putting on the helmet and using their comms. He's probably done that before since he's stolen those helmets. I didn't make that connection the first time that I was looking at this. So then Jedi like shows up like out of nowhere, and it's just one of those awesome hero moments where they just kind of pop up behind you and you don't hear anything. Then they talk. He says, "Come back, give me the thing back, and I'll teach you, or you can keep it and do your thing." And then he disappears as Batman-esque as possible, and another little epic fashion. So then he's sitting there and he's watching the little clip about Obi-Wan, which is awesome. I loved hearing that voice. I doubt it was Ewan, but it was close enough that it really hit me. And then something else that's really cool. Let me go full screen. Like, look at the expressions that they got on his face. Like they did a good job about making him look like a combination of like angry and just like super sad about the whole thing. Like, there's not that much definition. It's like a low poly kind of rendering of this kind of animation, but they still did a pretty good job of showing just the sadness in his eyes. It's really well done. So then he's watching, he's meditating. They're getting ready to take off, and then Obi. And then the kid comes back. Kid joins them. We see Mutton Chops, who's talking to his superior. We get the introduction of the superior, and this was beautiful introduction, which I'm pretty sure this is the same guy that we saw talking with Vader at the very beginning, but we didn't get a super good look at him, and we still did not get a name for him either. I do not believe, but really cool rotating angle, which you don't normally see in hologram type images in the live action films. So this was a really cool transition, and then into the title. I want to look up more. I don't know that I've ever seen Kiri Hart do anything outside of the Star Wars story group, so I was really curious to kind of look into that, and assuming that's the woman that I'm thinking of. But anyway, so that is the end of the first episode, which was a 2-parter, so that's technically episodes 1 and 2. So I'm going to tomorrow I will watch episode 3, and then pretty much I will try to immediately do another recording, and then I'm going to attempt to do one a day for the most part, leading up into the Obi-Wan premiere, and hopefully I will finish in time for that. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.